Admiral Tae Yang Kim stood in the command center on Luna Station. His hands were behind his back. His face showed no emotion. But inside, his heart was heavy. The large screens in front of him displayed something terrible. 200 alien warships were coming toward Earth. They were getting closer every hour. The aliens called themselves the Varkesh Dominion. They had destroyed many worlds before Earth. They had killed billions of humans in the outer colonies. They did not send warnings. They did not ask questions. They just attacked and destroyed everything. Tai Yang looked at the numbers on his screen. Earth had only 63 warships. Most of them were old. The alien ships were bigger, faster, and stronger. Any military leader could see the truth. This was not a fair fight. This was going to be a massacre. A young officer approached him. The officer's voice was shaking. He said the government wanted to know if they should surrender. Tae Yang turned to look at the officer. His eyes were hard as steel. He spoke clearly so everyone in the command center could hear. Humanity does not surrender. Not today. Not ever. The room fell silent. Every person there knew what this meant. They were going to fight. Many of them would die. But they would die standing up. Tae Yang turned back to the screens. He pressed a button on his console. A new image appeared. It showed a massive ship floating in space near the moon. The ship was 3 kilometers long. It looked like a sleeping giant covered in weapons. This was the Sovereign. It was humanity's last hope. The Sovereign was special. It had new technology that no other ship possessed. It could jump from one place to another instantly using something called a quantum drive. Scientists had been working on it for 10 years. But it had never been tested in real combat. Nobody knew if it would actually work when the fighting started. Tae Yang sent a message. He ordered Captain Hanacho to report to the Sovereign immediately. It was time to wake the giant. Captain Hanacho was only 34 years old. She was the youngest captain in the fleet. Many older officers did not like this. They thought she was too young and too inexperienced. But Hana had helped design the Sovereign. She understood the ship better than anyone else. She knew every system, every weapon, and every weakness. When she arrived at the shipyard, she stopped and stared at the Sovereign. Even after all the years of working on it, the ship still took her breath away. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. This ship could save humanity, or it could fail and doom them all. She walked through the corridors to the bridge. Her crew was already there waiting. Lieutenant J. Park was checking the weapon systems. He was 28 years old and brilliant with tactics. He had won every combat simulation he ever entered. But simulations were not real. Jay had never fought in an actual battle. When Jay saw Hana enter, he spoke up. His voice was confident, but his question was serious. Can one ship really make a difference against 200 enemy warships? Hana looked at him. She did not smile. She said that one ship with the right crew could change everything, but only if they believed it was possible. Dr. Yuna Bay was also on the bridge. She was the science officer and an expert on alien species. She had spent years studying the Varkesh. She knew their language and their technology. Yuna was 41 years old and very calm. While others panicked, she stayed focused. Yuna presented her research to the captain. She explained that the Varkesh thought humans were weak. They believed humans had barely learned how to travel between stars. The aliens expected an easy victory. They were arrogant and overconfident. This was something humans could use against them. Commander Dae Ho Song was in the engineering section below the bridge. He was 45 years old and had seen many dangerous situations. Once, he had survived when a reactor almost exploded on Mars. That experience had made him the best engineer in the fleet. Nothing scared Dae Ho anymore, but right now he was worried. He checked the quantum drive systems again and again. Something was wrong. The power stabilizers were not working correctly. If they tried to use the quantum drive during a battle, the ship might tear itself apart. He had only 12 hours to fix the problem. Dae Ho called the bridge. He told Captain Hana about the problem. She asked him how long he needed. He said 12 hours, maybe more. She told him he had 8 hours. The Varkesh were not going to wait. Dae Ho cursed under his breath and got to work. Down in the Marine barracks, Sergeant Misun Ryu was training her soldiers. She was 26 years old but already a legend among the Marines. She had graduated first in her class from the Orbital Combat Academy. She knew how to fight in zero gravity better than anyone. Her soldiers would follow her anywhere. Misun made her team practice boarding tactics. She knew that space battles were not just about ships shooting at each other. Sometimes soldiers had to get on enemy ships and fight face to face. The Varkesh were bigger and stronger than humans. But Misun taught her team to be faster and smarter. While the Sovereign prepared for battle, something happened on Earth. Every television, every computer, and every phone suddenly showed the same thing. An alien appeared on the screens. It was High Commander Vrex, the leader of the Varkesh fleet. Vrex was enormous. His skin looked like dark metal. His eyes glowed red. When he spoke, his voice was cold and cruel. He told humanity they had 48 hours to decide. They could surrender and become slaves, or they could refuse and be completely destroyed. He said there was no third option. People all over Earth watched in fear. Parents held their children. Old people cried. Young people felt angry and helpless. For the first time in centuries, humanity faced something that might end their existence. But then Admiral Tai Young Kim appeared on the screens. He stood in his uniform looking directly at the camera. He did not look afraid. He looked determined. He spoke to every human alive. He said that High Commander Vrex had offered two choices, slavery or death. But Taeyang said humanity would choose a third option. They would choose to fight. They would choose to resist. They would show these aliens what humans were really made of. His words spread across Earth and all the colonies. People stopped crying. They stood up straighter. They remembered who they were. Humans had survived ice ages and diseases. They had conquered their own planet when it tried to kill them every day. They had reached the stars through determination and courage. They were not going to give up now. Back on the Sovereign, the hours passed quickly. Daeho worked without sleeping. He replaced parts and rewired systems. His hands moved fast and sure. With 1 hour left, he finally fixed the problem. The quantum drive would work. At least he hoped it would. Captain Hana walked through the ship talking to her crew. She visited every section. She spoke to young officers who looked scared. She thanked the engineers who had worked so hard. She told them all the same thing. Today, they were making history. Today, they were showing the galaxy what humanity could do. When the 48 hours ended, the Varkesh fleet accelerated. They were coming for Earth. They expected humans to panic and surrender at the last moment. They were wrong. Admiral Taeyang gave the order. All human warships moved into defensive positions around Earth and Mars. The Sovereign disconnected from its dock. The massive ship's engines came to life. Blue light from the quantum drive lit up the darkness of space. It looked like a star being born. On the bridge, Captain Hana sat in her command chair. Lieutenant Jay was at the weapons station. Dr. Yuna monitored communications. Below them, Commander Daeho watched his engines. In the barracks, Sergeant Misun and her Marines put on their armor. Hana looked at her crew. These were good people, brave people. Some of them would not survive what was coming. She knew that. They knew that. But none of them hesitated. She gave the order that would begin the war, set course for the enemy. All hands to battle stations. The Sovereign turned toward the approaching Varkesh fleet. Its weapons came online. Its shields powered up. The ship that had been built in secret for 10 years was finally going to show what it could do. Behind them, Earth waited. Billions of people watched the screens. They saw the tiny human fleet facing the massive alien armada. The odds were terrible. Victory seemed impossible, but humanity had never cared much about odds. They had done impossible things before. They had climbed from caves to the stars in just a few thousand years. Now they would show the Varkesh and the entire galaxy something important. They would show them what happens when you threaten humanity's home. They would show them that some species do not know how to quit. They would show them that underestimating humans was the biggest mistake anyone could make. The war for survival had begun. The Sovereign moved through the asteroid belt like a hunter in the shadows. Captain Hana Cho watched the screens carefully. Thousands of massive rocks floated all around them. Each one was bigger than a building. Some were as large as mountains. This was dangerous territory. But it was also the perfect place for an ambush. Lieutenant J. Park studied his tactical display. The Varkesh fleet had split into 3 groups. The main force of 160 ships was heading straight for Earth, but a smaller group of 40 ships was coming through the asteroid belt. They thought they could surprise the human fleet by attacking from the side. Jay looked at Captain Hana and said they had found their target. The enemy commander's ship was in the center of the formation. It was bigger than the others and covered with weapons. If they could destroy that ship, the others might lose coordination. Hana nodded. She gave orders to her crew. Everyone needed to be ready. They would only get one chance at this. The Sovereign powered down most of its systems. It went dark and silent. It hid behind a massive asteroid and waited. The Varkesh ships entered the asteroid belt. They moved in a tight formation. Their shields were up and their weapons were ready. But they were looking forward toward Earth. They did not expect any attack from behind. Commander Daeho Song sat in engineering watching the quantum drive readings. The system was ready, but his hands were sweating. This technology had never been tested in combat. If something went wrong, the ship could disappear forever or explode into pieces. He took a deep breath and trusted his work. Captain Hana counted down. 3, 2, 1. Now. The Sovereign activated its quantum drive. Blue light surrounded the ship. For a split second, it existed in two places at once. Then it vanished from behind the asteroid and reappeared directly behind the Varkesh formation. The enemy had no warning. Their sensors showed nothing until the Sovereign was already there. Fire everything, Hana ordered. The Sovereign's weapons came alive. Railguns fired metal slugs at incredible speed. Energy beams cut through space. Missiles launched from every tube. All of this firepower hit the Varkesh ships before they could react. 3 enemy cruisers exploded instantly. Their shields had been facing the wrong direction. The Varkesh fleet panicked. They had never seen anything like this. One moment their sensors showed empty space. The next moment a human warship appeared like a ghost and destroyed 3 of their ships. They scrambled to turn around and return fire, but the Sovereign was already moving. It dove between 2 asteroids and disappeared again. The Varkesh fired their weapons but hit only rocks. Pieces of asteroids exploded in all directions. Dr. Yuna Bay monitored the enemy communications. The Varkesh were confused and angry. They were calling the Sovereign a demon ship. They said it broke the laws of physics. Their commanders were shouting orders. But Yuna could hear the fear in their voices. The Varkesh adapted quickly. They were experienced warriors who had conquered many worlds. Their commanders ordered them to deploy gravity well generators. These devices created strong gravity fields that would prevent the Sovereign from using its quantum drive. Suddenly, alarms blared on the Sovereign's bridge. Jay reported that the quantum drive was not responding. They were trapped. The gravity wells surrounded them like invisible chains. Enemy ships were closing in from all sides. Hana felt her stomach tighten. This was bad. Without the quantum drive, they were just another ship, and one ship could not fight 40 enemy vessels. She needed a new plan, and she needed it fast. The Varkesh opened fire. Plasma bolts and energy beams struck the Sovereign's shields. The ship shook violently. People grabbed onto their stations to keep from falling. Warning lights flashed red across every console. Commander Daeho's voice came through the speakers. The shields were holding, but barely. They were taking too much damage. If this continued, they would be destroyed in minutes. Hana looked at the asteroids floating all around them. A crazy idea formed in her mind. She ordered the pilot to move toward the largest asteroid nearby. The pilot looked confused but obeyed. The Sovereign turned and accelerated toward a massive rock the size of a small moon. Jay understood what she was planning. He targeted the Sovereign's weapons on the asteroid itself. They fired directly into the rock. The asteroid cracked and split apart. Huge pieces broke off and started drifting, but they were not just drifting randomly. The Sovereign had calculated the angles perfectly. The pieces were moving straight toward the Varkesh ships. The enemy tried to avoid the rocks, but there were too many. Massive chunks of stone and metal smashed into their ships. Shields flickered and failed. Hulls cracked open. 2 more Varkesh cruisers were destroyed by the improvised attack, but the battle was far from over. A Varkesh heavy cruiser moved alongside the Sovereign. Metal clamps shot out and grabbed onto the hull. The enemy was attempting to board. They would send their warriors inside and capture or destroy the ship from within. Sergeant Mi-sun Ryu received the alert. Boarders were cutting through the hull on Deck 7. She grabbed her weapon and called her Marines. They ran through the corridors toward the breach point. They could hear the sound of metal being cut apart. The Varkesh warriors broke through. They were massive creatures, each one nearly 3 meters tall. Their armor was thick and black. They carried weapons that could punch through steel. They roared as they entered the ship. Mi-sun and her team were waiting. They had prepared the corridor as a kill zone. As soon as the Varkesh entered, the Marines opened fire. Bullets and energy blasts filled the air. The noise was deafening. The Varkesh were strong, but the humans were smart. Mi-sun had positioned her soldiers behind cover. They fired in coordinated bursts. When one Marine needed to reload, another provided covering fire. The Varkesh fell one by one, but more enemies kept coming. Mi-sun realized they were trying to overwhelm the defenders with numbers. She made a quick decision. She ordered her team to fall back to the next intersection. They retreated in good order while still firing. At the intersection, Mi-sun had planted explosive charges earlier. When the Varkesh followed the Marines around the corner, she triggered the explosives. The blast killed 6 enemies instantly. The others stopped their advance and took cover. Mi-sun's voice was calm as she reported to the bridge. The boarding attempt was contained. The enemy had not advanced past Deck 7, but she had lost 3 Marines. Good people who would never go home. On the bridge, Dr. Yuna made a discovery. She had been listening to Varkesh communications during the entire battle. She noticed something strange. Whenever a commander's ship was destroyed, the other ships became confused for several seconds. They stopped coordinating their attacks. Yuna explained her theory to Captain Hana. The Varkesh used some kind of psychic network to communicate. The commanders were like the brain of the operation. If you killed the brain, the body would stop working properly, at least for a short time. Hana's eyes lit up. This was the weakness they needed. She asked Jay if he could identify the command ship. Jay studied his displays and pointed to a large vessel at the center of the enemy formation. That was the one giving orders to all the others. The problem was getting to it. The command ship was surrounded by escorts, and the Sovereign still could not use its quantum drive because of the gravity wells. Commander Daeho had been working on the problem in engineering. He called the bridge with news. He could restore quantum drive power for exactly 1 jump. Just 1. After that, the system would need 15 minutes to recharge. They had to make it count. Hana did not hesitate. This was their chance. Jay calculated the exact position they needed. The math had to be perfect. If they appeared too far away, they would miss. If they appeared too close, they might collide with the enemy ship. Everyone on the bridge was silent. They knew what was at stake. 1 jump, 1 shot. If they failed, they would be trapped in the middle of the enemy fleet with no way to escape. Hana gave the order. Execute the jump. The Sovereign vanished. For a heartbeat, it was nowhere. Then it reappeared right next to the Varkesh command ship. They were so close that crew members could see each other through the viewports. Fire everything, Hana shouted. Every weapon on the Sovereign fired at point-blank range. The Varkesh command ship's shields collapsed immediately. Armor melted. Explosions ripped through its hull. The massive vessel broke apart in a brilliant fireball that lit up the asteroid belt like a second sun. Exactly as Yuna had predicted, the other Varkesh ships stopped moving. Their formation fell apart. They drifted without coordination, confused and lost without their commander. The Sovereign used conventional engines to escape while the enemy was disorganized. The ship was heavily damaged. Fires burned on 3 decks. The shields were almost gone, but they had survived. Jay counted the results. 20 Varkesh ships destroyed or disabled. The Sovereign had damaged but alive. Against all odds, they had won. News of the victory reached Earth within minutes. People in every city celebrated. They cried with relief and joy. For the first time since the invasion began, humanity had proof that they could fight back. They could win. But on the Sovereign's bridge, nobody was celebrating. Hana looked at the damage reports. They had been lucky. Very lucky. The Varkesh would not be surprised again. They would adapt their tactics. The next battle would be even harder. Admiral Taiyang's face appeared on the communication screen. He congratulated Captain Hana and her crew, but his expression was serious. The main Varkesh fleet was still coming. 160 ships heading toward Earth. The real war was just beginning. Hana looked at her crew. They were exhausted and injured, but they were also determined. They had shown the galaxy that humans would not surrender quietly. They had drawn first blood. Now they needed to prepare for the storm that was coming. Because High Commander Vrex knew about them now, and he would be coming for revenge. High Commander Vrex stood in his command chamber aboard the warship Eternal Dominion. His red eyes burned with rage as he watched the reports from the asteroid belt. 20 ships lost. 20 of his warriors dead, killed by humans. Primitive humans who barely understood space travel. War Priest Kalth approached him carefully. The priest's voice was filled with anger. He said the humans must be punished severely. They must be taught their place. They must learn what happens when inferior species dare to resist the Varkesh dominion. Vrex agreed. He had conquered 17 species in his lifetime. None of them had ever hurt him like this. The humans would pay, but first he would break their spirit. He would destroy something they loved. He would make them watch as their world burned. Mars. The red planet that humans had colonized. 3 million people lived there in underground cities. Vrex decided Mars would be his example. He would bombard it from orbit until nothing remained. Then Earth would understand that resistance was hopeless. The Varkesh fleet, now numbering 160 ships, changed course. They accelerated toward Mars, their long-range weapons charged. They prepared to rain death on the planet below. At Luna Station, Admiral Taeyang received the terrible news. His face became pale. 3 million people on Mars, men, women, and children. He had friends there. His own sister lived in the capital city with her family. He immediately ordered evacuation transports to Mars. But his officers told him the truth. There was not enough time. Even with every transport working at maximum capacity, they could maybe save 1 million people. 2 million would be left behind to die. Taeyang's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to scream. He wanted to break something. But he was the admiral. He had to stay calm. He had to make the impossible decisions. He ordered the fleet to Mars, all 60 ships. They would defend the red planet with everything they had. On Mars, panic spread through the cities. People ran to the spaceports. Families carried children and precious belongings. Everyone wanted to leave. Everyone wanted to live. But there were not enough ships. Not enough seats. Not enough time. Some people gave up their seats to children. Parents put their kids on transports and stayed behind. Teachers stayed with students who had no family. Doctors remained at hospitals. These were the heroes that nobody would remember. The ones who chose to face death so others could escape. The human defense fleet arrived at Mars orbit. 60 ships against 160 Varkesh warships. The odds were terrible. Every captain knew this would likely be their last battle. But not one of them suggested retreat. The Sovereign was still being repaired at the Phobos shipyard above Mars. Commander Dae Ho and his engineering teams worked without sleeping. They welded broken hull plates. They replaced damaged systems. They pushed themselves beyond human limits. Captain Hana walked through the damaged corridors. She saw burn marks on the walls. She saw the empty stations where crew members had died. She visited the medical bay where injured sailors recovered. Each one asked her the same question. When can we fight again? The Varkesh fleet entered Mars orbit. They did not negotiate. They did not issue warnings. They simply opened fire. Massive energy beams lanced down from space. They struck the surface and melted rock. They created craters kilometers wide. The human fleet charged forward. They placed themselves between the Varkesh and the evacuation transports. Destroyers and frigates fired everything they had. Missiles streaked through space. Railguns sent metal slugs at incredible speeds. Every ship became a shield protecting the innocent. But the Varkesh were too many and too strong. Human ships exploded one after another. The destroyer Valiant rammed itself into a Varkesh cruiser when its weapons failed. Both ships were destroyed. The frigate Guardian stayed behind to fight 3 enemy vessels alone. It bought the transports 2 more minutes before it was obliterated. Lieutenant Jay watched from the Sovereign with tears in his eyes. Those were his fellow officers dying out there. Good people he had trained with. Friends he had known for years. They were sacrificing themselves and he could do nothing to help. Commander Dae Ho burst onto the bridge. His face was covered in grease and sweat. He shouted that repairs were complete. The quantum drive would work, maybe not at full power. Maybe it would fail after a few jumps. But it would work now. Captain Hana did not hesitate. She ordered the crew to battle stations. The Sovereign disconnected from the shipyard. Its engines roared to life. The damaged warship flew toward the battle like a wounded lion returning to the fight. When the human fleet saw the Sovereign arrive, hope returned. The massive ship appeared in the middle of the battlefield, its weapons blazing, every shot perfectly aimed. Varkesh ships that had been advancing suddenly found themselves under attack from an unexpected angle. Dr. Yuna transmitted targeting data to all human ships. She had found the weakness in Varkesh technology. Their power distribution system. Every ship had a central power node. If that node was destroyed, the entire ship would lose power. Jay coordinated the attacks. Human ships stopped shooting randomly. They focused fire on specific targets. On the power nodes, one Varkesh capital ship went dark. Then another. Then 3 more. The giant warships drifted helplessly through space, but the cost was terrible. The human fleet was being torn apart. 30 ships were destroyed in the first hour, then 40, then 50. Captain after captain broadcast final messages. They spoke of honor and duty. They told their loved ones goodbye. Then they died fighting. Admiral Tae Yang commanded from his flagship, the Indomitable. The massive dreadnought was the most powerful ship in the fleet except for the Sovereign. Tae Yang had been in many battles, but never one like this. Never one where defeat meant the end of everything. He looked at his remaining ships. Only 12 were still operational. The evacuation transports were almost full. They needed just a few more minutes. Just a little more time for people to escape Mars. Tae Yang made his decision. He ordered the remaining ships to form a wall between the Varkesh and the transports. It was a suicide formation. Every officer understood, but nobody refused. Tae Yang broadcast on all channels. His voice was calm and strong. He told his captains that today they would show the galaxy what humanity meant. They would prove that some things were worth dying for. They were the shield that protected Earth, and they would hold the line until the last ship was destroyed. The 12 human ships moved forward. They positioned themselves in a defensive formation. Behind them, the evacuation transports continued loading refugees. Every second counted. Every life mattered. The Varkesh concentrated their fire. They wanted to break through the human line. Energy beams and plasma bolts hammered the shields. One by one, human ships died. The cruiser Defiant, the destroyer Thunder, the frigate Hope. Each captain died at their post, buying seconds with their lives. The Sovereign fought like a demon possessed. Captain Hana pushed the damaged ship beyond its limits. The quantum drive flickered and sparked. Commander Daeho shouted warnings about system failures, but Hana ignored them. They needed to save those transports. Nothing else mattered. The Sovereign made jump after jump. It appeared behind Varkesh ships and destroyed their power nodes. It saved human vessels that were about to be destroyed. It drew enemy fire away from the weaker ships. Lieutenant Jay's fingers flew across his console. He calculated angles and trajectories faster than any computer. But even the Sovereign could not be everywhere. The Indomitable took a direct hit to its reactor. Explosions ripped through the great ship. Admiral Tae Yang ordered evacuation. His crew fled to escape pods. But Tae Yang stayed on the bridge until the last person was off. Then he ran for his own pod as the ship broke apart around him. The explosion of the Indomitable lit up Mars orbit. The Admiral's pod tumbled through space. A human frigate caught it with a magnetic beam and pulled him to safety. Tae Yang watched through the viewport as his flagship, his home for 20 years, burned like a dying star. Finally, the evacuation transports were full. They engaged their engines and fled toward Earth. The surviving human warships, now only 8 vessels, including the Sovereign, provided cover. They fought a running battle as they retreated. The Varkesh tried to pursue the transports, but the Sovereign blocked their path. Captain Hana positioned her ship directly in front of the enemy fleet. She dared them to go through her. The Varkesh accepted the challenge. 20 enemy ships focused all their weapons on the Sovereign. The shields collapsed. Hull armor melted. Fires burned on every deck. Commander Daeho reported that they were losing power. The quantum drive was dead. The main engines were failing. They were going to die, but the transports escaped. 1 million refugees reached safety. They would live to see another day. Captain Hana smiled through the smoke and flames. Her sacrifice had meaning. That was enough. Then something unexpected happened. The Varkesh fleet suddenly stopped firing. They began to retreat. High Commander Vrex had decided to regroup. He had lost 60 ships, far more than he had anticipated. The humans had hurt him badly. He needed to bring more forces before attacking Earth. The Battle of Mars was over. The red planet's surface was scarred and burning. 2 million people had died in the bombardment. The human fleet was reduced to 8 damaged ships. But the Varkesh had learned something important. Humans would not surrender. Humans would fight to the last breath. Captain Hana sat in her damaged command chair. Her uniform was torn and bloody. Her face was covered in soot. She looked at her surviving crew. They were exhausted and wounded, but they were alive. Lieutenant J reported the casualties. 52 ships lost. Over 30,000 crew members dead. The names would be read aloud. The families would be notified. Earth would mourn, but Earth would also prepare. Because everyone knew the truth. The Varkesh were coming back. Next time they would bring their full strength. Next time they would target Earth itself. The final battle was approaching, and humanity had to be ready. Admiral Taeyang floated in the rescue ship heading back to Luna Station. He looked at Mars through the viewport, the planet he had failed to save. He whispered a promise to all those who had died. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. We will make them pay. We will protect Earth no matter what it costs. 3 days after the Battle of Mars, Earth waited in silence. The blue planet hung in space like a jewel, but everyone knew that beauty would not protect them. The Varkesh were coming, 130 warships, and humanity had only 8 ships left to defend their home. Admiral Taeyang stood in the command center on Luna Station. He had not slept since Mars. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. His uniform was wrinkled, but his back was straight and his voice was steady. He was preparing to address the people of Earth one final time. Cameras broadcast his image to every screen on the planet. Billions of people stopped what they were doing to watch. In homes and offices, in shelters and hospitals, everyone looked at the Admiral's face. Taeyang spoke slowly and clearly. He did not lie about their chances. He did not promise victory. Instead, he reminded them who they were. Humanity had been born on a world that tried to kill them every day. Ice ages, diseases, predators, natural disasters. But humans survived all of it. They adapted. They learned. They conquered their own planet through pure determination. He said that if aliens thought they could do what nature could not, they were about to learn a painful lesson. Humanity would fight. Humanity would resist. And even if they fell, they would fall standing up. They would show the galaxy that Earth was not a planet to be trifled with. When the broadcast ended, something changed. People stopped crying. They stopped panicking. They stood taller. They remembered their strength. Parents hugged their children and promised to protect them. Young people volunteered for defense forces. Old people who remembered earlier wars picked up tools to help build defenses. On the Sovereign, Captain Hana gathered her senior officers for a final briefing. The ship was still damaged. Repair crews had done their best, but there had not been enough time. The quantum drive was barely functional. Commander Deho estimated they had power for maybe 3 jumps. 4 if they were lucky. After that, the system would fail completely. Lieutenant J presented his plan. His hands shook slightly as he brought up the tactical display. The plan was simple and insane. Use their remaining quantum jumps to strike at the heart of the Varkesh fleet. Target High Commander Vrex himself. If they could kill him, the entire invasion might collapse. Everyone in the room understood what this meant. It was a suicide mission. They would jump into the center of the enemy fleet with no way to escape. They would be surrounded and destroyed. But if they succeeded, Earth might survive. Captain Hana looked at each person. Commander Deho, Lieutenant J, Dr. Yuna, Sergeant Misun, her crew, her family. She asked if anyone wanted to transfer to another ship. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. They all stayed in their seats. The vote was unanimous. They would do it. The Varkesh fleet entered Earth orbit like a dark cloud. Their ships blocked out the stars. High Commander Vrex stood in his command chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion. His massive flagship was 5 kilometers long and carried enough weapons to destroy a continent. He smiled a cruel smile. Now the humans would pay for their resistance. War Priest Kalth stood beside Vrex. The priest was eager to begin the bombardment. He wanted to see Earth burn. He wanted to hear the humans beg for mercy. Then he would deny them that mercy. That was what they deserved for daring to fight back. The Varkesh opened fire on Earth. Massive energy beams lanced down from orbit. They struck the planetary defense grid. Surface batteries fired back. Railguns launched metal slugs into space. Missile silos opened and sent hundreds of warheads toward the enemy. The battle for Earth had begun. The 8 human warships charged forward. Each one knew this was their last fight. They spread out and attacked from different angles. They fired everything they had. When their missiles ran out, they used railguns. When the railguns failed, they rammed enemy ships with their own hulls. The destroyer Phoenix crashed into a Varkesh cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a massive fireball. The crew of the Phoenix died instantly, but they took 200 enemy warriors with them. That was their final gift to Earth. On Earth's surface, cities activated their emergency shields. Domes of energy covered the largest population centers. But the shields could not last long against orbital bombardment. People huddled in underground bunkers and prayed. Some prayed to God. Some prayed to their ancestors. Some just prayed for it to end quickly. The Sovereign moved through the battle like a ghost. Captain Hana had saved their quantum jumps for the critical moment. She watched and waited. She studied the enemy formation. She looked for her target. The Eternal Dominion. The flagship. The ship where Vrex commanded his fleet. Jay identified the flagship's position. It was in the center of the formation, surrounded by 20 escort ships. Getting close would be nearly impossible. But Hana had not come this far to give up. She gave the order for the first jump. The Sovereign vanished and reappeared in the middle of the Varkesh fleet. Enemy ships surrounded them immediately. But Hana had planned for this. She targeted the Eternal Dominion and fired every weapon. The flagship's shields flickered but held. The ship was too big, too heavily armored. Escort ships swarmed the Sovereign. Plasma fire hammered the shields from all sides. Commander Deho shouted that shield power was dropping fast. They had seconds before the shields collapsed. Hull breaches were already starting on the outer decks. Hana ordered the second jump. The Sovereign disappeared again and materialized right next to the Eternal Dominion's hull. They were so close that the two ships almost touched. At this range, the Sovereign's weapons cut through the flagship's shields and armor. Explosions bloomed across the massive ship's surface, but it was not enough. The Eternal Dominion was built to withstand entire fleets. It would take more than one damaged warship to destroy it. Vrex laughed in his command chamber. He ordered his escorts to destroy the annoying human ship once and for all. Sergeant Mi-sun had been waiting for this moment. She gathered her Marines in the launch bay. They climbed into breaching pods. These were small armored capsules designed to punch through enemy hulls. It was the most dangerous form of combat in space. Most Marines who used breaching pods never came back. Mi-sun looked at her team. 30 Marines, young and old, men and women, all volunteers. All heroes. She told them it had been an honor to serve with them. Then she sealed her helmet and climbed into her pod. The pods launched. They crossed the short distance between the ships in seconds. They slammed into the Eternal Dominion's hull with tremendous force. Cutting lasers activated. Metal melted. The pods broke through into the enemy ship. Mi-sun was the first one out. She found herself in a corridor full of surprised Varkesh warriors. She opened fire immediately. Her team followed her out, shooting and moving. The Varkesh were bigger and stronger, but the humans were faster and better trained. Dr. Yuna guided them remotely from the Sovereign. She had studied Varkesh ship designs for years. She knew the layout. She directed Mi-sun toward the bridge. That was where Vrex would be. That was where they needed to go. The Marines fought their way through the ship. Every corridor was a battle. Every intersection was a kill zone. Mi-sun lost soldiers one by one. Private Ko fell protecting his comrades. Corporal Huang died throwing himself on a grenade. Lieutenant Shin held a doorway alone against 20 enemies so the others could advance. By the time Mi-sun reached the bridge, only 5 Marines remained. But they had made it. The doors to the command chamber stood before them. Beyond those doors was High Commander Vrex, the alien who had ordered the death of billions. They breached the doors with explosive charges. Mi-sun stormed in with her remaining team. The bridge was enormous and filled with enemy warriors, but Mi-sun only had eyes for one target. Vrex stood in the center, towering over everyone. He held a massive weapon in his hands. The final Marines fell. Mi-sun found herself alone, facing the High Commander. He laughed at her. A tiny human, a female. Did she really think she could defeat him? He had killed champions from a dozen worlds. She was nothing. Mi-sun did not waste time with words. She attacked. The fight was brutal and fast. Vrex was stronger. His reach was longer, but Mi-sun was quicker. She dodged his strikes. She used his size against him. She targeted weak points in his armor. When her weapon was destroyed, she fought with her bare hands. When Vrex pinned her against a wall, she headbutted him with her helmet. When he raised his weapon to finish her, She grabbed a plasma grenade from her belt. Vrex saw the grenade. His eyes widened. For the first time, the great conqueror felt fear. Mi-sun smiled. She activated the grenade and held it between them. The explosion killed them both instantly. On the Sovereign's bridge, Dr. Yuna detected the loss of Mi-sun's life signs. Tears ran down her face, but she also detected something else. The Varkish fleet was falling into chaos. Their psychic command network was collapsing. Vrex was dead. Captain Hana saw the confusion spreading through the enemy ships. This was their moment. She ordered the third jump. Commander Daeho warned that this would destroy the quantum drive permanently. They would not be able to escape. Hana accepted this. Some sacrifices were necessary. The Sovereign jumped one final time. It appeared inside the Eternal Dominion, right next to the main reactor. Every remaining weapon fired directly into the reactor core. The massive flagship began to shake and groan. The reactor was going critical. Hana ordered abandon ship. The crew ran for the escape pods. But Commander Daeho refused to leave. He stayed at his station to ensure the reactor would overload. He locked the doors so nobody could come back for him. This was his choice, his final gift to humanity. Lieutenant Jay grabbed Captain Hana and dragged her toward the pods. She fought him. She wanted to stay with her ship, but Jay was stronger. He threw her into a pod and launched it just as the Sovereign began to break apart. The Eternal Dominion exploded. The blast was so powerful it could be seen from Earth's surface. A new star appeared in the sky for a few seconds. Then it faded. The flagship was gone. The Sovereign was gone. High Commander Vrex was dead. Commander Daeho was dead. Sergeant Mi-sun was dead. The Varkesh fleet panicked. Without Vrex to command them, they had no coordination. War Priest Kalth tried to take control, but the other commanders did not respect him. They argued among themselves. Some wanted to continue the attack. Others wanted to retreat. While they argued, the human defense forces struck. The remaining warships attacked with renewed fury. The planetary defense grid focused its fire. One by one, Varkesh ships were destroyed or forced to flee. The invasion was breaking apart. After hours of brutal fighting, the alien fleet turned and ran. Earth had survived. Humanity had won. Captain Hanacho floated in her escape pod. Through the small window, she could see the wreckage. Pieces of ships drifted in silence. Human ships. Varkesh ships. All destroyed, all gone. The greatest space battle in history was over. And somehow she had survived. Her communication system crackled. Admiral Taeyang's voice came through. It was quiet and heavy with emotion. He said just 2 words. We won. Hana closed her eyes. Victory. They had actually won. But the cost was terrible. She thought of Commander Daeho, who stayed with the Sovereign until the end. She thought of Sergeant Mi-sun, who sacrificed herself to kill Vrex. She thought of all the captains and crew members who died defending Earth. Thousands of names. Thousands of heroes. A rescue ship found her pod an hour later. They brought her aboard Luna Station. Medical teams checked her for injuries. She had broken ribs and burns on her arms, but she was alive. Lieutenant Jay was already there waiting. He had survived too. When he saw Hana, tears ran down his face. They embraced without words. There was nothing to say that they both did not already know. Dr. Yuna was monitoring Varkesh communications from her station. The surviving enemy ships were fleeing the solar system, but she intercepted one final message. It was from War Priest Kalth to the Varkesh homeworld. His message was not about revenge. It was a warning. Kalth told his people that humans were dangerous. They did not fight like other species. They were unpredictable. They were willing to sacrifice everything for survival. They turned their own ships into weapons. They boarded enemy vessels with no hope of escape. They killed High Commander Vrex, something no one had done in 50 years of conquest. Kalth recommended that the Varkesh Dominion avoid human space completely. Earth should be declared forbidden. Any ship that entered the solar system did so at their own risk. The message spread across dozens of alien civilizations. Within days, every species in the galaxy knew about humanity. They knew that humans were survivors, warriors, a species that refused to accept defeat. On Earth, people emerged from their shelters. They looked up at the sky. The stars were visible again. The alien ships were gone. Children played in the streets. Parents cried with relief. Old people who had survived so much in their lives added one more story to tell. The day Earth almost fell, The day humanity stood and fought. The day they won, but there was also mourning. Every city held memorial services. Billions of people gathered to remember the dead. Mars had lost 2 million civilians. The fleet had lost 30,000 crew members. So many families would never be whole again. So many children would grow up without parents. So many parents would bury their children. Admiral Taeyang gave the order to begin recovery operations. Rescue ships searched through the wreckage looking for survivors. They found escape pods drifting in space. Some contained living crew members. Others contained only bodies. Every person was brought home. Every name was recorded. Nobody would be forgotten. The governments of Earth met for an emergency session. Old rivalries seemed petty now. National borders seemed meaningless. They had almost lost everything. Only by working together had they survived. Representatives from every nation agreed to form a unified government. The United Earth government was born from the ashes of war. Admiral Taeyang was offered the position of Supreme Military Commander. He accepted, but only if Captain Hana became Chief of Naval Operations. She was young, but she had proven herself in battle. She understood both technology and tactics. She knew how to inspire people to do the impossible. The reconstruction began immediately. Mars would be recolonized. The cities would be rebuilt. The defense fleet would be restored and expanded. Humanity studied the wreckage of Varkesh ships and learned from their technology, but they also kept their own innovations. The quantum drive that made the Sovereign so deadly, the tactical creativity that surprised the enemy, these were humanity's true weapons. 6 months after the battle, a monument was built in Earth orbit. It floated at the exact coordinates where the Sovereign made its final stand. The monument was massive, built from steel and transparent material that reflected sunlight. Inside were the names of every human who died defending Earth, all 32,000 of them. Every name visible, every sacrifice remembered. At the center of the monument was a piece of the Sovereign's hull. It was scarred by weapons fire and burned black, but it had not broken. An inscription was carved into the metal. They stood when standing seemed impossible. They fought when victory was a dream. They gave everything so that humanity might live. Captain Hana visited the monument alone one day. She floated in a small shuttle looking at the names. She found Commander Daeho Song's name. She touched the transparent wall as if she could reach him. She whispered that the quantum drive was working again. They had improved the design. He would have been proud. She found Sergeant Mi-sun Ryu's name, the young Marine who had killed High Commander Vrex with her bare hands. Mi-sun had saved Earth with her sacrifice. Schools were being named after her. Children sang songs about the brave sergeant who never backed down. Her story would be told for generations. Hana made a silent promise to all of them. Humanity would never be unprepared again. They would build a fleet that could defend against any threat. They would reach out to other species in friendship, but they would never be weak, never be vulnerable. The galaxy had learned what happens when you threaten Earth, but the lesson would be reinforced with strength. 1 year after the invasion, Admiral Taeyang stood before the monument during the anniversary ceremony. Billions of people watched from Earth and the colonies. The sky was filled with new warships. The fleet had been rebuilt. Humanity was stronger than ever. Taeyang spoke about sacrifice and courage. He talked about the moment when humanity stood at the edge of extinction and refused to fall. He reminded everyone that they were alive because ordinary people chose to do extraordinary things. Teachers who stayed with students. Engineers who fixed impossible problems. Soldiers who charged into certain death. Captains who turned their ships into weapons. He concluded with words that would become humanity's creed. Words that children would learn in school. Words that would be carved on monuments across the solar system. Words that defined what it meant to be human. We were born on a world that tried to kill us and we survived. We reached for the stars and we claimed them. We faced annihilation and we stood victorious. This is who we are. This is what it means to be human. We do not surrender. We do not yield. We endure. The ceremony ended with a moment of silence. Every person on Earth and in the colonies stopped what they were doing. For 1 full minute, billions of humans stood in silence, remembering, honoring, promising to never forget. 5 years passed. Earth flourished. The colonies expanded. Mars was more beautiful than before, with new cities rising from the ashes. Humanity spread across the solar system with confidence. They built stations around Jupiter. They mined asteroids. They sent exploratory ships to nearby star systems. Then something unexpected happened. An alien ship arrived at Earth. But this one did not come to conquer. It came with a white flag. It came in peace. The ship carried ambassadors from 3 different species. They wanted to establish diplomatic relations. They wanted trade agreements. They wanted to learn from humanity. The ambassadors spoke of the legend that had spread across the galaxy. The legend of the Sovereign, the ghost ship that appeared and disappeared in battle, the legend of Captain Hana Cho, the young commander who outsmarted a superior enemy, the legend of Sergeant Misun Ryu, who killed a conqueror with her bare hands, the legend of humanity, the species that refused to die. Admiral Tae Yang received the ambassadors personally. He was older now with more gray in his hair, but his eyes were still sharp. He welcomed them to Earth. He told them that humanity sought peace, but he also made it clear that Earth would defend itself if threatened. The ambassadors understood. They respected strength. Humanity took its place among the galactic civilizations, not as conquerors but as equals who had earned respect through courage and sacrifice. Other species looked at humans with a mixture of admiration and caution. They knew that humans were dangerous when cornered, but they also knew that humans valued honor and loyalty. The Varkesh Dominion still existed, but it avoided human space. They had learned their lesson. War Priest Kalth had been right. Humans were not like other species. They fought with a desperation and creativity that made them unpredictable. Better to leave them alone. Captain Hana, now Admiral Hana Cho, stood in the command center on Luna Station. She was 40 years old. She commanded a fleet of 200 warships. Every ship was equipped with quantum drives. Every crew was trained to sovereign standards. Earth was protected. Humanity was safe, but she never forgot the price of that safety. Every morning, she looked at a photo of the original sovereign crew. Commander Daeho smiled in the picture. Sergeant Misun stood at attention. Lieutenant J made a silly face. They were young and alive. They did not know they would become legends. Hana kept their memory alive. She told their stories to young officers. She made sure every new ship captain understood what sacrifice meant. She taught them that technology and tactics were important, but courage and determination won wars. On the 10th anniversary of the battle, Hana returned to the monument. She was not alone this time. Lieutenant J, now a captain himself, came with her. Dr. Yuna Bay, who had become Earth's chief diplomat, joined them. Admiral Tae Yang, retired but still respected, was there too. They floated together in silence, looking at the names. Looking at the peace of the Sovereign. Looking at Earth, the blue planet that had survived. They had all lost friends. They all carried scars. But they had also witnessed something incredible. They had seen ordinary people become heroes. They had seen humanity refuse to surrender. And in the darkness of space, the monument glowed with reflected sunlight. A beacon of hope. A reminder of sacrifice. A promise that humanity would never forget those who gave everything. The stars stretched out forever, infinite and waiting. Humanity's journey among them had just begun. But they traveled forward with confidence. They had proven themselves in the fire of battle. They had earned their place in the galaxy. The battlefield had grown silent. The enemy had fled, and humanity stood victorious. The end.